Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. So what the heck is going on with the approval of ATACMS strikes inside of Russia? And US and UK top diplomats are in Ukraine to discuss long-range weapons. The visit comes as President Zelensky ramps up his requests to the West to provide weapons with more firepower and fewer restrictions. What the hell? There was supposed to be an announcement. So let's check in with Julie Grace. She was the source of this information. She's a Capitol Hill reporter. And she was quoting House Foreign Affairs Chairman Michael McCaul. Michael McCaul issued another statement with her. I want to clarify that the Secretary told me, this is Secretary Blinken, ATACMS would be a key topic of conversation in his meetings in the UK and Ukraine, but did not confirm that the Biden-Harris administration would finally allow Ukraine to target Russian military sites inside of Russia with ATACMS. However, I took the opportunity to remind him that Congress specifically directed the administration to send Ukraine ATACMS in the supplemental. This was passed back in May. And that placing arbitrary limitations on those weapons violates the intent of the law. I hope they reverse this damaging policy as soon as possible. So all the reports are that this approval is coming. There's a political process currently playing out. Consensus building is difficult and sometimes time-consuming. So if you want my opinion, what is happening here? I think Jake Sullivan does not want to reverse this position, but he's being forced to. Political pressure from our allies, especially the UK, political pressure from Congress. They're basically forcing Jake Sullivan's hand, and he has to reverse this policy. So Jake Sullivan, I think, is demanding that everyone go on the record saying they want to do this. So this is what's currently happening. This is a statement from Senator Roger Wicker. He's a Republican from Mississippi, putting out a letter saying we need to reverse this policy. And here's some high-ranking members of the Senate like Dick Durbin signing this letter saying, please, President Biden, reverse this policy. Same is true in the House of Representatives. Once again, they drafted a letter. They sent it to the White House saying this policy needs to be changed. You can see all the highest-ranking Republican members of the House have signed this letter. I don't see Speaker Johnson, but we've got Michael McCaul, Mike Rogers, and Mike Turner. On top of that, former US and UK officials urge the removal of restrictions. An open letter signed by former diplomats and military leaders urges the US and UK to remove restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range weapons. So everybody is saying they're for this. Jake Sullivan is demanding, I want everyone on record saying that this is what they wanted in the event that something bad happens as a result. So the Kremlin warns of appropriate response if the US lifts the ban on missile strikes. Now, if you watch my videos, you know what I think. I don't think the Russians are going to do anything. The Russians are currently doing everything they're capable or willing of doing to win this war. They're already blowing up hospitals. They're already blowing up thermal power plants. They've already attacked the dams in Kyiv. They're not going to use nuclear weapons. There's nothing else the Russians can do. And the Kremlin already believes the United States has authorized this. They think it's already happening. Missile strikes greater than the 100 kilometers from the border are going to happen. So Putin himself is not going to make any more threats. Medvedev has kind of shut up recently. So Peskov was the one who made a comment about this policy change, and he basically said nothing. The Russians are going to do nothing when this policy changes. So what the United States wants to do is when this policy changes, they want the world community to know it was the Russians who escalated. And they're using this connection to Iran to say, we're responding to your escalation. U.S. says Iran has sent missiles to Russia to hit Ukrainian cities. He said that dozens of Russian military personnel have trained in Iran using the Fa-360 missile, which has a range of 75 miles or 120 kilometers. These are short-range ballistic missiles. The Iranians have shipped probably about 200. And Russian military personnel have gone to Iran to learn how to operate and maintain them. Satellite images show Russian ship transporting ballistic missiles from Iran. We have the satellite images. Here are the ships. Here's the path. They've already been shipped. They're arriving in Russia. They now just have to be set up and put in range before they start being fired on Ukrainian cities. So President Zelensky clarified there's been no confirmation yet that Russia has used Iranian ballistic missiles against Ukraine. But we know what Russia's going to do. Of course, Russia is going to use these missiles and start attacking Ukrainian cities. So this is the cat and mouse game between the longtime rivals of Washington, D.C. and Moscow. And these are short-range ballistic missiles, 120 kilometers. Russia has to put them up in place within ATACMS range before they can fire them. So I think the United States might be waiting for these to be put in range of ATACMS, and then that will be the first official ATACMS strike up to the 300-kilometer limits that ATACMS have. And once that's done, I mean, you can start hitting the airfields and hitting other ammunition depots or command posts or whatever. But yeah, this is a big escalation from the Russians, and the United States wants to politically frame this to the world as we're only responding to what Russia is doing. For people in Ukraine, I know this is maddening. This is upsetting. I'm going to share this tweet from Ukrainian journalist Maria Avdieva. After watching the Blinken-Lamy presser with ballistic missiles threat over Kyiv, I've got one question. How many more Ukrainians have to be butchered by Russia before we're allowed to hit back? Words of support won't win this war. We need the right to defend ourselves. It's that simple. In my mind, blowing up a children's hospital is reason enough to allow this authorization, but this is just the political process playing out. But the approval is coming. Long-range strikes with Western-donated weapons deeper into Russian territory will start occurring in the short term. It's going to happen. Concerning the territory of Kursk, Russia has recaptured part of the Kursk region. Units of the North Group of troops liberated 10 settlements within 2 days, according to Russia's defense ministry. So we did get a map update. Here's that village of Koronevo that Ukraine has not been able to take. And the Russians surprised everyone and went on the counterattack. And you can see the gray zone expanded just a little bit. Now, this is happening right now on the battlefield. We don't have all the information yet, but it appears that Russia is counterattacking from Koronevo, as well as the Glushkovo district. This region isn't capable of being resupplied, so I can't imagine Russia can sustain an offensive from the west very often. But I don't think Russia's actually thinking this through. If you look at this map, you're saying, okay, the Russians are here, the Ukrainians are here, just sweep east. But that's not how this works. The Ukrainians have the Glushkovo district surrounded. So once again, there are reports that as the Russians try to push east to take back their own territory, this red line is the trench network that they built, well, the Ukrainians can just cross the border and attack them from the south. They're also on the west. This is really intense fighting currently happening. We'll know more in a couple days, but I just wanted to update you guys. So this video, I feel, is pretty representative of the average Russian mindset of people from this region. In the Kursk region, more than 100,000 Russian civilians had to flee, they had to evacuate, but about 18,000 Russian civilians chose to stay in the Ukrainian-controlled territory of Kursk. And here is an interview given by a Russian teenage girl who says she's excited to leave Russia. She's excited to become a refugee inside of Ukraine, and hopefully can make her way to the European Union. Here's what she says. She's being interviewed, and this is a question. Aren't you afraid that you will be considered a traitor in Russia? I already am, she replies. So you're a traitor? Yes. As soon as they found out in Russia that we said that Ukrainians aren't harming us, they started calling us traitors. How could it be any different? But you're saying the truth. The truth doesn't matter. The government doesn't care. Returning to Russia isn't an option for me. Media will start chasing me, maybe even the FSB, I don't know. Do you want to go to Ukraine with your grandmother? To Ukraine, yes, I plan to go study in Europe next year, but I didn't know how. Now it would be easier for me to study in Europe if I was in Ukraine. I wish to finish school in Ukraine. So this is a Russian high school girl from the Kursk region living in the occupied territories, and she just wants to leave Russia forever. This is how loyal the children of Russia are to their czar. But we need to clarify, what does she actually think and believe? And she's never cared about the war, one way or the other. She doesn't care if Ukrainians survive or die. She's just looking for a way out of her collapsing empire. She knows that Russia is losing. She only views Ukraine as a stepping stone to get to the European Union, to get to a better life. She doesn't even consider the possibility of trying to help Ukraine in exchange for benefits to herself. I'm not going to use the word parasites, but this poster did. She has never said anything about being ashamed of Russians killing Ukrainian civilians for the last 10 years. Yep, this seems like a typical Russian. But she is now a refugee. Because she said this on camera, she can't stay in Russia. She will be targeted. She will be brutalized by her own people. She'll be tortured for saying this on camera. She now has to move to Ukraine, and she'll probably never be able to move back to Russia. On top of that, Kursk evacuees say they're still waiting for their $100 payment promised by Putin. This invasion of Kursk was over a month ago, and Putin promised the people fleeing their homes that they would be compensated with $100, whatever the equivalent in rubles is. And it's been more than a month and Putin still hasn't given them the money. More bad news for Russia. Ukrainian Manpads take down a Russian Su-30 jet over the Black Sea. The Ukrainians took control of these oil and gas rigs located here. For some reason, this Russian jet was flying close by, and the Ukrainians got it with a Manpad. This is a $50 million jet, and I'm guessing both the pilots lost their lives. Teen arsonists burned down a Russian Mi-8 helicopter for 5 million rubles promised to them on Telegram. The Russians have been doing this in Ukraine. They've been promising payments to kids in Ukraine to set stuff on fire or destroy stuff. So it looks like Ukraine is now doing the reverse inside of Russia, promising Russian teens money if they destroy stuff. Here's the picture of the helicopter that they burned down. Apparently the teenagers ended up injuring themselves and then having to go to the hospital. I don't know if they'll be paid. Russia claims drone attacks on Murmansk Oblast, 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine. We don't have any pictures or videos or confirmation from Ukraine, but this is the Russian military saying that their airbase in Murmansk was attacked, and this is 1,700 kilometers from Ukraine, so that's interesting. Here's a follow-up on a Russian ammunition depot in Voronezh that was attacked. We have the satellite images. This is the before, and this is the after. You can see that the ammunition depot was in this forested area, hoping that maybe the forested area would conceal the loading and unloading of ammunition, but nope, Ukraine got it. Freight train derails in Belgorod region due to railway interference. In Russia's Belgorod region, a locomotive and train cars derailed due to illegal interference. No injuries were reported, but passenger trains were rerouted. Here's a picture of what the train looks like on its side. Russian Telegram channels have posted this video showing a traffic jam of, oil trucks. And they're outside the Moscow oil refinery, lined up to fill it. The rumors is that the Moscow oil refinery, which was struck by Ukraine a week or two ago, is no longer operational. So all of these trucks have been summoned to Moscow to fill up and move the oil and refined products to other depots and other refineries. This looks like a huge waste of time and money. Good job, Russia. Let's now update on US politics real quick. Trump refuses to say he wants to support a Ukrainian victory. Harris accuses him of surrender in the presidential debate. So yesterday here on the channel, I made a completely separate video going over the parts of the US presidential debate relating to Russia and Ukraine. I'll link it down below if you want to watch it for yourself. But today, we have to follow up with the expert analysis on Kremlin state TV. Russian TV reacts to debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and it's good. I'll link the whole clip down below, but let me read for you the highlights of their analysis of the US presidential debate. Which campaign headquarters pop champagne? Well, let's acknowledge Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters pop champagne, and Trump's campaign headquarters did not. She managed to lure Trump into every trap that she set up for him. You didn't watch it, but I did. I wish I hadn't watched that. Your goal as a candidate is to attract the undecided voters and to show your moderate side, and you say illegals are devouring dogs. This is some pretty good analysis, it's true. When Trump is at his campaign rallies, he can say stupid and extreme things, such as they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, because everyone at that rally is already voting for him. Those are his supporters. But when you go on national TV, when 60 million Americans are watching, you need to tone it down. You need to appeal to a broader audience, saying that Haitian immigrants in Ohio are eating cats and dogs when there's zero evidence. There's no proof for that story. Trump just basically torpedoed himself. This sounds like a premise from hell. It attracted no one to his side. His supporters who worry for their dogs are already on his side. He had to attract undecided voters. He failed to do so. Harris came off as a forward-looking woman. Trump was hunched over. He kept talking about Biden, kept talking about the past. She is looking to the future. He's an old Gramps who keeps looking back to the past. Some observers concluded that Trump is already coming to terms with his defeat. From my point of view, the goal before Kamala Harris and her campaign was brilliantly carried out. It was brilliantly done. She trashed Trump, smashed him to pieces. Her goal was already achieved. I think Kamala Harris is the next president of America. She doesn't need any other debates. There will be no other debates. She has nothing left to prove. The Democrats have a colossal, ironclad argument against any attempts by Republicans to question the outcome of the voting. Everyone saw who is worthy of becoming the next president of the United States. Let's take a break. I maintain my opinion that this is very sad. So I just read for you the analysis of this one commentator on the program, but then the host of the show says, for some reason, he's now very sad. So yes, I think the Russians are having some buyer's remorse, funneling hundreds of millions of dollars into right-wing podcasters and influencers here in the United States to push Trump, because Trump is just such a terrible candidate. He's 78. He's the oldest man ever nominated for president. And I'm not going to let this story go about these Tenet media influencers. In the last week, I've been contacted by people who know them. They know them in person, and they've had conversations with them in person. And these guys knew that their money was coming from Russia. Sure, Tenet Media was an American company. They can say they were always paid by an American company. But they knew that Tenet Media was being funded by Russians. And they didn't want to question it. So what's happening now with the FBI and the Department of Justice, I can't go on the record and say anything that I've heard from other people about these people, because the DOJ and the FBI are doing their investigation, and the way this works is they're looking for people to cooperate. Right now, they're applying pressure to all of them to provide evidence, to cooperate, and to promise they'll testify in court in exchange for absolute immunity. So of these 6 people, it's now a race. Who's going to flip on the other 5? Who's going to flip on the other 4? And yes, I definitely think of these 6, 1 or 2 of them is going to cooperate with the FBI and the DOJ. In exchange for immunity, they will share evidence that they all knew that the money that Tenet Media was getting was coming from the Russians. And once again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI revealed that they're tracking 600 right-wing influencers here in America who are being paid, directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, by the Russians to push Trump, push support for Russia, and weaken support for Ukraine. If you enjoyed the last presidential debate, we are going to have one more, this time between Governor Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. This is supposed to happen the first week in October. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if J.D. Vance refuses to do it, because he's going to be destroyed. J.D. Vance has the charisma of a broken parking meter, and he just can't stop saying stupid and offensive things. So here is J.D. Vance, this was yesterday, giving an interview, and he basically revealed what is Trump's peace plan. Trump's been very careful not to give this one specific detail, and J.D. Vance just gave away the game.
Ukraine wants this war to end. Europe, which, by the way, has underfunded this war while American taxpayers have been very generous to the Ukrainians,
So once again, J.D. Vance has to repeat the lie that America has given way more aid to Ukraine than Europe. This is not true. The United States has given more military aid, but the Europeans by far have given more financial and humanitarian aid. You have to count it all, J.D. Vance.
Europeans want this war to end because it's jacking up their energy prices. So I think what this looks like is Trump sits down, he says to the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, you guys need to figure out, what does a peaceful settlement look like? And what it probably looks like is something like the current line of demarcation between Russia and Ukraine. That becomes like a demilitarized zone. It's heavily fortified so the Russians don't invade again. Ukraine remains its independent sovereignty. Russia gets the guarantee of neutrality from Ukraine. It doesn't join NATO. It doesn't join, some of these sort of allied institutions. And I think that's ultimately what this looks like.
So that is Donald Trump's vice president telling the media what Trump's plan is. Freeze the current conflict, Russia gets to keep everything they take, and Ukraine can never join NATO. Ukraine can never have real security or a guarantee that Russia's not going to attack them again in the future. Appeasement to a dictator. And this isn't just about territory. Trump and J.D. Vance want to talk about territory, but it's about people. There are millions of Ukrainians in the city of Melitopol, in the city of Berdyansk, who don't want to live in Russia. They were born and raised in Ukraine. They want to live in Ukraine, in their hometowns of Melitopol and Berdyansk. And the Trump campaign just said they're going to sell out all these people, millions of people, no accountability, no reparations, no justice for all the Ukrainians who have been killed by the Russians really the last 10 years. So we're having an election here in the next 51 days. I'm absolutely confident Kamala Harris is going to win. We have to get past November 5th. We have to know what the majorities will be in the U.S. Congress. And then we're going to start making moves. Step 1, win this election. Step 2, win this war. Russia will be defeated. J.D. Vance and Trump aren't going to be able to save the Russians. I do want to quick mention this because this does impact how people vote here in America. But the price of ICE Brent crude, this is the international price for oil, just fell to $72 a barrel. This is a 3-year low. You have to go back to 2021 to see the price of oil this low. Price of oil going down makes it cheaper at the pumps when people fill up their tanks here in the United States. People really seem to care about that for some reason, but yeah, this is bad for the Russians if energy prices are falling. They can't fund their war if the price of oil keeps going down. What is causing the price of oil to go down? The United States and other Western central banks have held elevated interest rates the last 2.5 years to combat inflation. This weakens demand, energy prices fall. On top of that, the United States is going gangbusters producing oil. Look at this chart. Crude oil production as a percent of world total. And the United States now produces 50% more oil than Saudi Arabia. You can see Russia's production numbers the last 2.5 years have been going down due to sanctions and lack of Western components and expertise to help them. And then Saudi Arabia just voluntarily is producing less because they want to drive the price up. They want the price of oil closer to $100 a barrel. But the United States doesn't care. We keep pumping. We keep producing. Thank you, Joe Biden, for our drill, baby drill policy. I don't know how you can spin this any other way. I also want to give a shout out to Erdogan. He said this and he didn't have to. Erdogan says Crimea must be returned to Ukraine for a just end to this war. Erdogan stated the peninsula must be returned to Ukraine in accordance with international law and expressed hope for a peace deal based on Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So Erdogan of Turkey has more political courage than Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Yep. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Blinken announces over $700 million in humanitarian and energy aid for Ukraine. As well, the UK, both their foreign ministers were in the country. The UK announced a $781 million aid package. I think this was £600 million. This is going to include aid for the energy sector as well as humanitarian aid, and I think there's some air defense aid as well. Thank you so much to the amazing people of the UK. The UK also slapped some fresh sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet. Russia now maintains on their own a shadow fleet of a couple hundred ships to move their oil around the world in violation of, the price caps and sanctions, but you can always do more sanctions. Thank you so much to the people of the UK. Netherlands gives Ukraine the green light for Russia to strike deep with Dutch weapons. This is specifically referring to F-16s firing any kind of missiles from these F-16s. So thank you so much to the Dutch people for having a lot of courage and amazing leadership on these issues. Final clip I want to share with you has to do with the city of Lviv. Russia, almost 2 weeks ago, bombed the historic downtown, destroying many residential buildings. This is friend of the channel Richard Woodruff on the ground in Lviv, and he wants to share with you the help he's trying to provide to patch up some of these homes.
I am currently in Lviv, one of the places that we're helping to repair at the moment. You'll be able to see our guys up on the balcony just over there, and we're helping to repair those buildings at the moment. But yeah, as you can see, just all of these buildings destroyed. There was a second floor up here. As you can see, the side of it building there now and the top of the roofs, everything's just been destroyed. We will rebuild, and we'll make sure that none of these people get left behind. I just want to thank everyone that's already donated so far on Twitter. Yeah, we're just trying to buy the basic supplies at the moment to make sure that these guys can at least waterproof their homes. This is some of the woods that we've already bought and some of the insulation material over there. And
this is what the historic downtown of Lviv currently looks like after Russia struck it with drones and missiles. If you want to help rebuild some of these houses, patch them up before winter, this is the organization on the ground, the nonprofit Angel of Life. I'll put the link for this down below if you'd like to make a donation to help out. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.